Okay, my outstanding friends, this is going to be fun. Who decides what's true? Who decides? Well, I can tell you who decides. The experts, the scholars, the academics, the teachers. Well, let's look into what that consists of. All right, when I first discovered the mud fossil giants 10 years ago, I was literally destroyed. Well, guess what? Look at this. Shocking human remains found beneath Stonehenge, blowing up history. You want to see what's going to blow up history at Stonehenge? Watch this. This is what they can't deal with. This is the heel stone. It's a foot at Stonehenge, and there was a twin to this, they said, that was removed. Well, the twin was his other foot. Heel stone is way down, way away from the main thing where his legs would have been. And the main thing is all made of body parts as well. I looked at it very carefully. I understand this stuff better than anybody else in the world. I've been doing this 10 years. I understand all of the chemistry and all of where the blood supply should be, and the colors, the blacks and the reds and the ferrous oxides, the tips of the toes. You see these little spots in the tips of the toes? Those are what they call terminal blood terminals, and that means that's where the blood ends up and comes back up the vein side. I understand this very well. It's all body parts, and I contacted Stonehenge, and they said don't ever contact us back again. And who decides what's true? They're really starting to get into it now. This is all within the last couple of years. Now, mine was 10 years ago, and Michael Tellinger down here, this is just a year ago he put this in. However, well, somebody put it in. But Michael has been doing this at least as long as I have. And this is a giant human footprint he found, or it's in Africa or somewhere in South Africa. That's where he's from. And I know Michael. I've talked with him. And he has the same mud fossils I have. Everybody has them. They just won't look at them because they refuse to think. To think or not to think, that is the question. Not to think has been the answer. All right, this is on my property. Nobody can stop me from doing what I'm doing. This is on my own property. This is a fingertip, and that's the fingernail. That's the little bumper pad that bumps up to your next bone. Blood supplies. Fingernail. Guess what? I smashed the fingerprints off it so that I could get inside and get some blood out of it, which I did. And here is the fingerprints. You see that little bump there and that little bump there? Those are sweat pores. You see them? Sweat pores? They're in the ridges of your fingerprints. That's the little tiny stripes on your fingerprints, the ridges. That's where these sweat pores are. My thumb is the width of one of the fingerprint ridges. It's like, you know, just think how big this is. It's almost 3 feet long, just the fingertip. I figured this was at least 150 feet, 180 feet minimum tall, if it was anatomically exact, and they appear to have been. And that's, not only did I show you the fingertip that has that fingerprints, I went up inside the finger itself into an artery and extracted some of the contents of that artery, and it was excellent quality DNA. I will show you the test in a minute. And here's another one that I had here that was from my property, same thing, and this one here is a giant hand, and I have a bunch of parts to this one. Now, remember I showed you the grip skin that had the fingerprints on it. This is also grip skin. You see the silvery looking stuff and how it's peeling up here? That is a real tough skin, and it's on your fingers, it's on your fingertips, it's on your toes and your palms of your feet. Now, that peels off. This is a left hand. If you put your hand out like this and splay it out, you will have the same thing running down there. This is the bumper pad that runs around your hand. This is where your left thumb goes off that way. This is only right about up to here. This isn't even the whole hand. This is way down to here. This thing is gigantic. And it's a little over, I think it's maybe 3 feet, a little over that wide. And I have some of the knuckles and the fingertips, and I've had them CAT scanned and DNA tested exactly the same. DNA was human. CAT scan showed the transition from the flesh into the bone in the fingertips. Now, in addition to these, I had this also CAT scanned and DNA tested. This is a human lung, and it is human, it's DNA tested human. And that is the depression of the heart. This is a left human lung, died laying like this from a flood, which is all these things were from a flood. And now I pretty much fully understand the process. And this is what they call pleura, which is the coating, the fabric of the lung, basically a membrane. And that's why they all came out of the ground. I used to call this fascia-facilitated fossilization, which means the membranes that coat everything protected them. But I also found out now that I believe these all drowned in the Great Flood, which was everywhere in the world they talked about it. So don't tell me it didn't happen. It happened, no question. Everywhere in the world has the same situation of these mud fossils, and they are flat as a pancake. So in the Great Flood, I also found out that it was written, Velikovsky's, in his account of what happened, which was documented in every culture on Earth. There was a great flood, and a comet almost hit Earth, and at that point the oceans boiled from the magnetic influence. They said it was a invisible grip that took hold of the Earth and wrenched it, and caused violent activities, huge floods, and because of that, atmosphere to atmosphere, it literally combusted the air, and there was boiling of the oceans. And I think these body parts were partially cooked, and then they sunk in the mud and became mud fossils. I've been working on this 10 years, and it's always perplexed me how come they were so exactly, exquisitely preserved. I mean, even like this goose. Look at how perfect it is. The feather pattern's still up there. Everything's perfect. But it also has a flat spot, because it died laying like this. You see? And the neck went out flat like this, and when it got broken off, that's where the neck is. You can see where the neck was if you really know how to look at it. But this is a process called nucleophilic substitution. Only happens in water, in watery substances, and there can be all kinds of different chemistry in that water. Will invade different things in different ways. That's why sometimes you have opals that have all kinds of colors, and sometimes you have opals. I got one around here somewhere that has no color, and they call them water opals. I don't know where it is. I got so much junk laying around here. Wait a minute, maybe this is it. Nope, that's this one here is just saturated with blood. The water opal is just like this, but there was no transition metals, and it's clear. Hold on, I'll find it. Because this is a heart, but it's a solid blood heart now. Or it could be a liver. I can't tell the difference, to be honest. All right, the nucleophilic substitution, I've explained it over and over. I'm not going to get into it deep now. But this is, I believe this is a liver, and it's almost pure blood. This is a heart, I believe, and that is one of the ventricles of the heart, or the aorta, or whatever. But it's you see that round spot there, and you can see deep in here. This is what's called a water opal, and if it was in a condition where there was a lot of blood, you would have all kinds of transition metals would have stabilized this instead of the clear molecules. And I'll show you how one of these could turn into literally, where do you see it? Hold on, you blow your mind. All right, that's a heart, and this was also a heart, I believe, and this was all the substructure and the composition of the interior of the ventricle walls and the heartstrings and all that. And this had the same stuff, only this turned into a stone, a water opal. Now let me show you what a blood opal looks like. They don't call them blood opals, I do. All right, instead of being in a situation where all of these little things turned into clear, they turned into the transition metals, which is what's in blood. These are the things that are in blood. And they are right here in the center of the periodic table, because you are never stable in your body, ever, ever. The only thing that keeps you alive is these transition metals, taking out the garbage and bringing in the nutrition and bringing in the oxygen and bringing in all. They just transfer, they transition. They have a little pincher on them. And that's what flows through your body, picking up garbage and bringing out in the good stuff. And then there's also bacteria lives in your body, and that breaks down all the stuff so that these little molecules can do their job of taking these little bits and pieces. So the bacteria is critical, and then you have to have the blood metals. And between the two of them, you're healthy. Without that, you have no immune system. That's just a little extra for you. Okay, so who decides truth? I'm going to show you the DNA reports. Now they're all starting to talk about the giants within the last year or 2 or 3. And I've been doing it for 10 years and was dismissed and demeaned. Yale is 20 minutes from my house. I have this stuff right here on my property. They refuse to even just to talk to me. So I went and got all the stuff done, the DNA, CAT scans, the whole 9 yards, still refused. So who decides the truth? Does Yale decide the truth? They can just ignore that kind of stuff? That does not work well for me. Okay, this is when I was told by all of the top universities, oh, you'd have to have this, you'd have to have DNA and CAT scans and anatomists and all. I did all of that, 100%. This was 3 extractions that I did. I took the extractions from these mud fossils that are on my property, bagged them up, and sent them off to be analyzed. Now, I used all the precautions, so don't tell me it was contaminated. Secondly, it was excellent quality and it was dense. I talked to the lab director. He said he was amazed how excellent it was. Now, there was 3 extractions, and I sent them off, and they were the things I showed you: the lung, the big gigantic fingertip, and the hand. And, you know, there's a bunch of stuff you could read here. It's online, and I suppose I maybe put a link to it. But it tells all what they did, and this was when they were doing PCR amplification, which is to see if they could find these sequences, and then, you know, and they were dense. They were dense. 2 of them were dense. The mud hand was not quite as dense because that was a lot more muddy. The other ones were actually bloody, really bloody. And he said it right here. He says, excellent quality DNA sequences obtained for the 36-inch tip and the lung. Excellent quality. And here's what they are: Homo sapien, mitochondrial, cytochrome B, and D loop region. That means the mother's side is exactly identical. And he said it was 100% identical to us modern humans. Giants. And one of them was our size. The lung was our size. The other 2 were giants. So, and one of them was a middle-sized giant. One of them was a gigantic giant. And they appear to have all been living here at the same time, together on my property. So, you know, I don't know, they washed down here. But this was a certified test, and they're verified by the lab director. And I talked to him, and this is what it is. Now, and he wanted to be sure that I made sure that nobody, that I was very clear that I was the one that extracted it. If these are contaminated, I was the one that contaminated them. He says he will stand by 100% of what his analysis was, that they were dense and, you know, heavy DNA, excellent quality. I showed you that, and I had anatomists look at this, and I had them do CAT scans. There's no question they are what they are. So who decides the truth? Does Yale decide the truth on this? I don't think so. They're certainly not being truthful as far as I can see. If they refuse to look at it and then claim that this can't possibly be true because it just can't be true, and that's not a scientific assessment. And I find them as fiduciary failures to their students if they won't examine something that shows that there is something else to examine. Okay, this is Derek Briggs from Yale University, again, right down the street from me, refuses to examine my specimens after I did everything that they requested I do. Still refuses to see it. This happens to be is derek.briggs@yale.edu. Maybe you want to ask him why he won't examine the things that I'm trying to present to him. And he decides. He decides, and he tells the students, you have to believe what I tell you or I will fail you. Now that, to me, is not acceptable. Derek, you better pay attention, my friend, because this is a legal obligation. Fiduciary failure is not something to take lightly. All right, now let's turn our attention to Einstein and the rest of that crew. Who decides if light can accelerate? Well, I can see it accelerate, so I'm deciding it accelerates. Who can decide if it's a wave or a particle? I can decide it's both. And how can I decide that? Because that is obviously a wave, but it is a particle in the middle with a gigantic magnetic field around it. This is the actual photon particle. And yes, you can see these with cell phones because they use CMOS technology exactly identical to what CERN and all the rest of them use. Look it up. Smartphones can be used for cosmic ray detectors, which is nothing more than this, to see muons. And these are muons and electron showers, and that I can also prove. So who decides what's true? Guess who decides? Don Lincoln decides. He won't allow this to be seen. These are the muon neutrinos. These are the electron neutrinos, the black and white balls that I just showed you a second ago. We'll go back to them in 1 second, because they come in green too. I'll show you the green. Well, whatever, I'll show you something. So you got a black and a white ball. They crash into another medium, which happens to be here, and the white separates into a shower, and the black stays the black ball. Now, let's see what happens and why these things wobble, because they talk about muon wobble. Nobody can understand that. Well, I can tell you why. Well, let me show you why. Now, don't forget, Fermilab, Don Lincoln is the guy that blocked me from showing this to anybody. The muon and the electron neutrino is what he's looking to find. I found him. He said he actually told me I won't take 1 minute to look at anything you've presented because you're not peer-reviewed. Who decides? You can't see this with your own eyes? That's fission, where the black and white balls separated. That's fusion, where they're coming back together. This is raw muon energy. We can get free energy and hopefully save the world, possibly. But Don Lincoln decides that nobody should be able to see this. So it's unknown, and he won't examine it, and he blocked me from showing it. So that's the kind of people that are making the decisions for us. Who decides the truth? Who decides? I could see that it accelerated. If you can't see that it accelerated, you've got a problem with your eyes. And if you want to see why the wobble happens, here's why it happens. Because these are the photons. An electron, another electron, back to back. They are tiny, tiny, tiny bar magnets. Very, very tiny. And the leading one charges up because it bashes into these little bitty particles that are, as it's coming through, it charges up, starts to glow strongly, then it flips and goes to the back. The black comes to the front. This one that's discharged comes to the front, and its black goes to the back. So it's just a flop as soon as it charges up. But it's in the process of charging now. This one's discharged. So that's the key. So they flop. That's why they call them the wobble. All right, so who decides the truth? Who decides? I just showed you how these things are created. Let's show it one more time. All right, this is the red pulsed laser. Laser is light. You see these little glowy particles? That's what I said causes the wobble. The glowy part is banging into these. As it glows, it'll flip, and they call that the up or down spin. Now, here comes the particle accelerating. No question, accelerating. Einstein was very, very wrong. And we can see this particle is right here. That is the particle. And it's back-to-back electrons. And that's the smallest particles we know of. Nobody knows what light is. Well, I can show you what light is. Nobody knows what dark matter is. That's the dark matter. That's the muon. That's the things they're trying to find at Fermilab. And Don Lincoln decides what is allowed to be seen, and my stuff is not allowed to be seen because it puts them to shame. So who decides the truth? Who decides the truth? Is it strictly for status, the truth? No, I think the truth is the truth. It may hurt, but it's the damn truth. I just did a video showing that we can actually harvest the light from there, and I showed how to harvest it on CMOS chips, and I actually showed it harvesting when I increased light onto the chip. That means that we can take that laser, accelerate it, create this extreme energy, which is fission. This is cold fusion. This is the holy grail of energy. Nobody has ever done this before. They're trying to do it with hot fusion, and it's never going to work because the amount of heat that they put in, they can't even get that back. I don't have to put anything in. This is strictly passive device, nothing required whatsoever. And it separates the heavy particles, which is the muons, from the light particles, which can concuss and explode, which are the electron portion. That's when they separate it. Then we can collect them in a solar collector, basically. So somebody's got to do this, and they're going to make a ton of money. I want nothing. I just want the truth, and the truth is not allowed by people like Don Lincoln. Derek Briggs, and all of the universities, virtually all of them, 100%. I've tried to contact everybody, and I was shocked to understand how people run away from the truth now. It's really disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. And it is, I believe it's a criminal offense in, for them not to look at what has a merit, something that is physical, something that has CAT scans and so forth. I believe this is a fiduciary failure, and certainly Fermilab, Don Lincoln, is a failure to the whole country. He's the one they're putting in charge to try to help us, and couldn't care less about the truth as far as I'm concerned. That's what I see. If somebody can change that opinion to me, I'd love to have them to discuss it with me. And I asked Don to do this over and over, and he refused and finally blocked me. He said, I won't spend 1 minute to look at what you have to present. Not 1 minute, because you're not peer-reviewed. You're a tinfoil hat guy. Leave it to us pros. 20 years of continual failure. That's what I see as Fermilab. So I said, Don, no, I'm not leaving it to you pros. You guys failed for 20 years. What do you want me to do? All right, I told you the green are exactly identical to the red, and they concuss exactly the same way and wobble the same way. And here's a real close-up of the green. Here we go. You see it? The more they concuss, then they get this spike, and then all of a sudden they flip, and then they split, and the black and the white splits, and I showed that very clearly. And here's the red doing the exact same thing. And it comes in from this side, and they start to manifest themselves. You see nothing at all except right straight into the venturi. Up in here you don't see any light, although it's filled with the same particles. And then they manifest themselves here as they start to stack up at the venturi, then here they explode. All right, so who decides what's true? It doesn't matter. They decided what I'm showing is true, but if one won't let it be seen, I don't see where there's any truth being looked for there. I got a couple little tweaks for you. Society's become so fake that the truth actually bothers people, and it really upsets them.